The blood-soaked telegram trembled in Violet Dawson's hands as she stepped off the stagecoach into Telluride, Colorado territory, 1876. Her future husband, dead, and her face forever changed by the same fire that had claimed her family home back east. The journey west had been punishing, each mile stretching her dwindling resolve. Violet kept her head down, the brim of her bonnet pulled low over her face. The spring air carried the mingled scents of pine and horse manure, with the distant clang of mining equipment echoing down from the surrounding mountains. Telluride was booming. Silver and gold had transformed this valley into a bustling frontier town practically overnight. Men in dusty work clothes and women in practical frontier attire bustled past her as she stood frozen, unsure of her next step. Her fiancé Thomas had written regularly of opportunity here, of the boarding house his aunt owned where Violet would stay until their wedding. But Thomas was gone now, his body buried somewhere in Kansas after the stagecoach robbery that had claimed him. The same journey that had left half her face scarred from flying glass and splinters when their coach had overturned during the escape. "Miss, you look a bit lost." The voice startled her from her thoughts. Violet turned slightly, careful to keep the right side of her face angled away. A woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and kind eyes regarded her with a gentle expression. "I'm looking for Mrs. Henderson's boarding house," Violet said softly. The woman's face softened with recognition. "You must be Thomas's Violet." Violet's throat tightened. "Yes. I'm Martha Henderson. Thomas was my nephew." The older woman's eyes shone with unshed tears. "We received word about what happened. I'm so terribly sorry, dear." Violet nodded, not trusting her voice. "Come along. You must be exhausted." Martha gently took one of Violet's bags. "The house isn't far." They walked in silence through the muddy main street. Telluride was smaller than Violet had imagined from Thomas's letters, but bustling with activity. Men hauled ore carts, shopkeepers arranged displays, and horses pulled wagons loaded with timber and supplies. The surrounding mountains towered above, their peaks still snow-capped despite the spring thaw in the valley. Martha's boarding house was a 2-story wooden structure painted a cheerful yellow with white trim. A small sign hanging from the porch declared, "Henderson House Clean Rooms, Honest Rates." "It's not much," Martha said as they climbed the steps, "but it's home." Inside, the house was neat and modestly furnished. The aroma of baking bread filled the air, bringing a momentary comfort to Violet's weary spirit. "I've prepared the corner room upstairs for you," Martha said. "It has a nice view of the mountains. I thought you and Thomas would be sharing it eventually." The mention of Thomas brought fresh pain, but Violet managed a small nod. "Thank you for your kindness. Your family, dear, or would have been." Martha's expression grew concerned as she finally got a better look at Violet's face in the light of the hallway. "Oh, my dear girl, your poor face." Instinctively, Violet turned away. "It's nothing." "Nonsense. Let me show you to your room so you can rest, and then perhaps I can tend to it properly." The room was small but pleasant, with a brass bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and a small writing desk beneath the window that overlooked the mountains. Violet set her valise on the floor and removed her bonnet, wincing as the motion pulled at her healing wounds. "I'll bring up some hot water and my healing salve," Martha said. "It's done wonders for burns and cuts." Alone in the room, Violet moved to the small mirror hanging on the wall. She rarely looked at her reflection anymore, but now she forced herself to examine what remained of her face. The left side was untouched smooth skin, a clear blue eye, the same features she'd had all her life. But the right side was a landscape of angry red scars, puckered skin that pulled her eyes slightly downward, and a jagged line that ran from temple to chin. The physicians had told her she was fortunate. The damage was superficial, her eyes still worked, she could still hear, speak, eat without difficulty. But they didn't understand that in losing her beauty, she had lost her future. What man would want her now? Thomas had loved her beauty. He had written poems about her flawless skin, her delicate features. In his last letter, he'd called her the loveliest flower of the East, soon to bloom in western soil. A knock at the door pulled her from these bitter thoughts. Martha entered with a steaming pitcher of water and a small jar of salve. "Let's get you cleaned up. The stagecoach journey is filthy business, and those wounds need proper care." Too tired to resist, Violet allowed Martha to tend to her. The older woman worked with gentle efficiency, cleaning the dust from Violet's skin and applying the fragrant salve to her scars. "The damage will fade somewhat with time," Martha said, "and I've seen much worse heal better than expected." "It doesn't matter," Violet whispered. "Thomas is gone." Martha's hand stilled. "Yes, he is, and that grief will take time to heal as well, but you're still here, and still young. Who would look at me now? Who would want—" Violet's voice broke. "Plenty of folks in these parts carry their scars on the outside," Martha said firmly. "Life in the West isn't kind to vanity, but it rewards strength, and you have that in abundance, making it all the way here on your own after everything." Violet didn't feel strong. She felt broken and lost, but she was too exhausted to argue. "Rest now," Martha said, gathering her supplies. "Tomorrow's soon enough to decide what comes next." After Martha left, Violet unpacked her few belongings. Among them was a letter of introduction to the town's schoolteacher. Thomas had arranged for her to assist at the school upon her arrival. Teaching had been her profession back east, before her engagement. She had assumed she would give it up after marriage, but now— She set the letter aside. Tomorrow, as Martha said. For now, she needed sleep. Morning brought a clear sky and the sound of the town coming to life. Violet dressed carefully in her plainest high-necked blouse and dark skirt. She arranged her hair to fall slightly over the right side of her face, offering some concealment of her scars. Taking a deep breath, she headed downstairs. The boarding house's small dining room held a long table where several guests were already eating breakfast. Martha bustled about with a coffee pot, while a young girl of about 12 helped serve plates of eggs and biscuits. "There you are," Martha said warmly. "Everyone, this is Miss Violet Dawson, newly arrived from Pennsylvania. Violet, these are my current boarders." Martha introduced them quickly. "Mr. Patterson, a clerk at the assayer's office, the Wilcox sisters who ran the millinery shop, and Mr. Osgood, an elderly prospector who claimed to be just one strike away from retirement." Violet kept her head slightly turned as she nodded greetings, conscious of the stares, the barely concealed reactions to her face when she had to turn fully to respond to someone. "Sit here, dear," Martha said, pulling out a chair. "Lily, bring Miss Dawson some breakfast, please." The young girl. Martha's granddaughter Violet soon learned brought a plate piled with food that Violet knew she couldn't possibly eat, but she made an effort. "I thought you might like to get settled today," Martha said. "But whenever you're ready, I'd be happy to introduce you around town." "Actually," Violet said, "I have a letter for the schoolteacher. Thomas arranged it before—" She trailed off, not needing to finish. Martha nodded. "Miss Winters, a formidable woman, but fair. The school is just past the church, can't miss it." After breakfast, Violet donned her bonnet and ventured out. The morning air was crisp, the sky an impossible blue against the mountain peaks. Telluride's main street was already busy with wagons, horses, and pedestrians going about their business. Violet walked with her head down, flinching at each curious glance that lingered too long on her face. The schoolhouse was a simple wooden building with a small bell tower. When Violet entered, she found a classroom full of children ranging from about 6 to 14, all seated on wooden benches before a stern-looking woman in her 40s. "May I help you?" the woman asked, pausing in her arithmetic lesson. "Miss Winters, I'm Violet Dawson. I believe Thomas Henderson wrote to you about me." Recognition dawned in the teacher's eyes, followed by the now familiar flicker of shock at Violet's appearance. To her credit, Miss Winters recovered quickly. "Yes, of course. Children, continue with your problems. I'll return momentarily." Outside in the small entrance hall, Miss Winters scanned the letter Violet presented. "Thomas spoke highly of your teaching experience," she said. "We're desperately in need of assistance here. The town is growing faster than we can accommodate. I'd be happy to help, Violet said, relieved at the businesslike approach. The younger children especially need attention. Can you start tomorrow? Violet nodded, grateful for the purpose. Yes, thank you. 8 o'clock sharp, Miss Winters said, her expression softening slightly. And Miss Dawson? I heard about Thomas. I'm sorry for your loss. The following week settled into a routine. Violet taught the younger children in the mornings, helping them with their letters and numbers while Miss Winters handled the older students. In the afternoons, she assisted with sewing lessons for the girls while the boys went outside for physical activities. The children, after initial curiosity about her scars, accepted her with the remarkable adaptability of youth. Adults were another matter. Violet felt their stares when she walked through town, heard the whispers that followed her. She kept to herself, speaking only when necessary, taking her meals early or late to avoid the communal dining table whenever possible. At night, in the privacy of her room, she would remove the scarf she'd taken to wearing draped partially over her face and apply Martha's salve to her scars. They were improving, the angry red fading to pink, but the damage was permanent. One evening in late April, as Violet sat on the boarding house porch with a book, Martha joined her with 2 cups of tea. You're settling in well, the older woman said, handing Violet a cup. The children are wonderful, Violet replied. They make it easier. Martha nodded. Children see clearly sometimes, but you're hiding yourself away too much, dear. There's more to life than that classroom. It's easier this way. Easier, perhaps, but not better. Martha sipped her tea. There's a social at the church this Saturday. Music, dancing, food. The whole town will be there. Violet tensed. I think you should come, Martha interrupted gently. You can't hide forever. I'm not hiding, Violet protested. I'm being practical. No one wants to see this. She gestured vaguely toward her face. That's where you're wrong, Martha said firmly. You're a bright, educated young woman with much to offer. Don't let those scars become who you are. Violet didn't respond, but Martha's words lingered in her mind through the next day's lessons. Was she hiding? Perhaps. But the thought of entering a social gathering, of enduring more stares and whispers, made her stomach clench with anxiety. Still, by Saturday afternoon, she found herself standing before the mirror, holding up the blue dress she'd packed for her wedding to Thomas. She hadn't worn it since arriving in Telluride, hadn't had occasion to. It was the finest thing she owned, cornflower blue with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Tentatively, she put it on, surprised to find it still fit properly despite the weight she'd lost during her recovery and journey. She arranged her hair carefully, allowing it to fall softly over the right side of her face. It wasn't a perfect concealment, but it helped. When she descended the stairs, Martha beamed. You look lovely, dear. I feel ridiculous, Violet admitted. Perhaps I shouldn't. Nonsense, Martha said, already ushering her toward the door. It'll do you good to socialize a bit. The church was transformed for the social, with lanterns strung across the ceiling and the pews pushed back to create space for dancing. Tables laden with food lined one wall, while a small group of musicians tuned their instruments in the corner. Martha immediately drew Violet into a group of women, making introductions. Violet smiled politely, answered questions about her teaching, and tried to ignore the sidelong glances at her face. Eventually, she drifted toward the refreshment table, hoping for a moment's respite. Lemonade? The deep voice startled her. She turned to find a tall man holding out a cup to her. His face was tanned from the sun, with laugh lines around serious gray eyes. He wore a clean but well-worn shirt with a leather vest, and his dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the collar. Thank you, Violet said, accepting the cup and immediately turning her scarred side away from him. Isaac Keller, he said. I don't believe we've met, miss. Dawson, Violet Dawson. Ah, the new school teacher. My nephew Caleb speaks highly of you. Violet searched her memory. Caleb, the boy with the freckles who's good at sums? Isaac smiled, transforming his serious face. That's him. He says you don't make him feel stupid when he gets things wrong. Just help him figure it out. He's a bright boy, Violet said, feeling a rush of warmth at the compliment. Miss Winters says you're a godsend, Isaac continued. The school's been overwhelmed with all the new families coming in for the mines. Are you a miner, Mr. Keller? Violet asked, genuinely curious. He didn't have the rough look of most of the miners she'd seen. No, madam. I run a ranch about 5 miles outside town. Cattle mostly, some horses. A rancher, not a cowboy then, Violet said without thinking. Isaac chuckled. I can rope and ride with the best of them, if that's what you're asking. But I own the spread, so I suppose rancher is more accurate. The music started up then, a lively tune that sent several couples onto the improvised dance floor. Would you care to dance, Miss Dawson? Isaac asked. Violet's hand instinctively went to her scarred cheek. I don't dance anymore. Isaac's gaze followed her movement, his eyes taking in what she tried to hide. His expression didn't change, but Violet felt exposed nonetheless. Another time, perhaps, he said easily. Enjoy the lemonade. He tipped his hat slightly and moved away, leaving Violet with a strange mix of relief and disappointment. She watched as he joined a group of men near the door, his tall frame easy to track in the crowd. Martha found her a few minutes later. I see you've met Isaac Keller. Briefly, Violet replied. He mentioned his nephew as one of my students. Isaac's a good man. Built that ranch from nothing after the war. Martha's tone was casual, but Violet caught the speculative glance she cast between her and Isaac. Don't, Violet said quietly. I'm not looking for anything like that. Martha patted her hand. I'm just making conversation, dear. But since you brought it up, why not? You're young. He's unmarried, and Lord knows he could use some refinement in his life. Martha, please, look at me, Violet whispered fiercely. Men like that don't court women like this. She gestured to her face. You might be surprised what men like, Martha replied cryptically, before being called away by another guest. The social continued around her, but Violet felt increasingly out of place. After an hour, she made her excuses to Martha and slipped out of the church. The spring evening was cool but pleasant, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. She took a deep breath, relieved to be away from the crowded room. Leaving so soon, she turned to find Isaac Keller leaning against the church wall, smoking a cigarette. He quickly extinguished it as she approached. I'm not much for crowds, Violet said. Neither am I, he admitted. I come because Mrs. Henderson guilts me into it, says I'll turn into a hermit if I don't socialize occasionally. That sounds familiar, Violet said with a small smile. I'm heading back to my ranch, Isaac said. Would you allow me to walk you to the boarding house first? These streets can get rowdy on Saturday nights. Violet hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. They walked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the sounds of the social fading behind them. Telluride's main street was indeed becoming livelier as miners and cowboys filled the saloons. How are you finding our town, Miss Dawson? Isaac asked. It's different from what I'm used to. Rougher. That it is, he agreed, but there's something honest about it. No pretenses out here. A group of drunken miners stumbled out of a saloon ahead of them, their loud laughter carrying on the night air. Instinctively, Violet moved closer to Isaac, who smoothly steered her to the opposite side of the street. Don't worry, he said quietly. They're more interested in their next drink than in bothering us. I'm not used to such boisterousness, Violet admitted. It's a mining town, Isaac said with a shrug. Men work hard, play hard. Most are decent enough once you get to know them. They reached the boarding house too quickly. Violet paused at the bottom of the steps, turning to face him. In the lamplight spilling from the windows, she knew her scars were visible. Thank you for walking me home, Mr. Keller. Isaac nodded, his gray eyes meeting hers directly. My pleasure, Miss Dawson. Perhaps I'll see you at church tomorrow? Yes, I'll be there. He tipped his hat. Good night, then. Violet watched him walk away, his long stride carrying him quickly down the street. There was something about his straightforward manner that was both disarming and intriguing. He had looked at her face, really looked without the usual flinch or quick aversion of eyes that she had grown accustomed to. The next morning, Violet dressed carefully for church, choosing a high-necked dress in a soft green that Martha had once commented brought out the color of her eyes. She arranged her hair as usual to partially shield her scars and added a small hat with a modest veil that offered additional coverage without seeming too obviously concealing. The church was crowded when they arrived, the same space now rearranged with pews facing the pulpit. Martha led her to a seat about halfway down the aisle. Violet kept her eyes forward, ignoring the curious glances from those around her. Just as the service was about to begin, she became aware of someone sliding into the pew beside her. A glance revealed Isaac Keller, looking somewhat uncomfortable in a clean suit that seemed slightly too small for his broad shoulders. He nodded politely to her before focusing on the minister. The service was simple but heartfelt, the minister's sermon touching on themes of perseverance and faith in difficult circumstances. Violet found herself moved by the words, particularly when he quoted from Isaiah, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways." Perhaps there was purpose in her suffering, in the path that had led her here. It was a comforting thought, if difficult to embrace fully. After the service, the congregation lingered outside, exchanging greetings and news. Violet stood slightly apart, as was her habit, but Isaac sought her out. "Miss Dawson," he said, joining her under the shade of a pine tree, "I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I wanted to ask if you might consider joining me for dinner next Sunday after church." Violet's surprise must have shown on her face because he quickly added, "Just a simple meal at Whitman's restaurant. Nothing improper." I don't know what to say," Violet stammered. "Yes would be the simplest answer," Isaac said with a small smile. "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Isaac's expression grew serious. "Because I'd like to know you better, Miss Dawson." "Is that so strange?" Violet's hand went to her scarred cheek, a gesture that had become almost involuntary. "Most men don't. That is, I'm not. I see a beautiful woman who teaches my nephew with patience and kindness," Isaac said simply. "That's reason enough for me." Violet studied his face, looking for signs of mockery or pity. She found neither, only a straightforward sincerity that was both disarming and frightening in its intensity. "All right," she said finally. "Sunday dinner." Isaac's smile returned. "Excellent. I'll call for you at the boarding house around noon, if that's acceptable." "It is." He tipped his hat. "Until then, Miss Dawson." Violet watched him walk away, joining a young boy who must be Caleb and a woman who resembled him enough to be his mother Isaac's sister, perhaps. The boy looked back at her and waved enthusiastically. Violet waved back, a small smile forming despite her confusion. Martha appeared at her side. "Well, well, that's interesting." "It's just dinner," Violet said quickly. "Of course it is," Martha replied, not bothering to hide her pleased expression. "Just dinner with one of the most eligible men in the county." "I'm sure he's just being kind," Violet said, though even as she spoke the words, she wasn't convinced. There had been something in Isaac's direct gaze that suggested more than mere kindness. The week passed quickly, filled with lessons and schoolwork. Violet found herself watching Caleb Keller more closely, noting his quick mind and earnest efforts. Once, she caught him staring at her scars when he thought she wasn't looking. Unlike most, he didn't look away when discovered, but simply asked, "Did it hurt awful bad, Miss Dawson?" "Yes," she answered honestly, "but it's much better now." He nodded solemnly. "My pa got burned real bad in the war. He said eventually you stopped noticing it so much." "Your father is very wise," Violet said, touched by the boy's forthright compassion. "He died last year," Caleb said matter-of-factly. "That's why we live with Uncle Isaac now." "I'm sorry for your loss," Violet said softly. Caleb shrugged. "Uncle Isaac says he's in a better place, and Uncle Isaac takes good care of us." The conversation stayed with Violet throughout the week. There was clearly more to Isaac Keller than she had initially assumed. She found herself looking forward to Sunday with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety that she hadn't felt in months. Sunday arrived clear and warm, a perfect late spring day. Violet spent more time than usual preparing, trying on several dresses before settling on a blue and white striped cotton that was practical, yet flattering. Martha helped her arrange her hair, incorporating a small white flower from the boarding house garden. "You look lovely," Martha assured her, "and nervous as a cat. It's just dinner, remember?" Violet laughed shakily. "That's what I told you." "Well, I was right to be excited, and you're right to be nervous," Martha said, patting her hand. "But Isaac Keller is a gentleman. You have nothing to fear." Isaac arrived precisely at noon, wearing a clean black suit similar to the one he'd worn to church, but with a new white shirt and polished boots. He removed his hat as Martha showed him into the parlor where Violet waited. "Miss Dawson," he said, his eyes warming as they took her in, "you look beautiful today." "Thank you, Mr. Keller," Violet replied, grateful her voice remained steady despite the fluttering in her stomach. "Whitman's is just down the street," Isaac said as they stepped onto the porch. "I hope that's still acceptable to you." "Of course." They walked side by side down the boardwalk, nodding to acquaintances as they passed. Violet was acutely aware of the glances they attracted the scarred newcomer and the respected rancher, but Isaac seemed entirely unbothered. Whitman's was Telluride's finest restaurant, which wasn't saying much by Eastern standards, but the tables were clean and covered with white cloths, and the wooden floors had been recently swept. A heavy-set man with an impressive mustache greeted Isaac warmly. "Mr. Keller, good to see you. Your usual table?" "Thank you, Sam," Isaac replied, guiding Violet to a corner table by the window. Once they were seated, Violet found herself suddenly at a loss for words. It had been so long since she'd been in a social situation like this, and even longer since she'd been the focus of a man's attention. "I'm afraid I'm out of practice with this sort of thing," she admitted. Isaac smiled. "That makes two of us. I haven't taken a woman to dinner in, well, a very long time." "Your nephew speaks very highly of you," Violet said, seizing on a safe topic. "Caleb's a good boy. He and his mother have had a rough time since my brother-in-law passed." "He mentioned that his father died in the war." Isaac shook his head. "Not exactly. James survived the war, but came home with terrible burns and damaged lungs from a fire. He lingered for years before pneumonia finally took him last winter." "I'm sorry," Violet said softly. "That must have been difficult for all of you." "It was hardest on Sarah, my sister, and the boy. They moved to the ranch after James died. It's been an adjustment for everyone, but we're managing." Their food arrived, roast beef with potatoes and spring vegetables, simple but well prepared. As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily. Isaac asked about her teaching, and Violet found herself sharing stories about her students, the challenges and rewards of the classroom. In turn, he told her about his ranch, the difficulties of establishing it after returning from the war, the satisfaction of watching it grow. He spoke with quiet pride of his cattle, his plans for expanding into horse breeding. "You seem to know what you want," Violet observed. "I always have," Isaac replied. "It's a family trait my mother used to say. Once a Keller sets their mind to something, there's no changing it." "Is that why you asked me to dinner?" Violet asked, the question slipping out before she could reconsider. Isaac regarded her steadily. "Partly. I know what I want when I see it, but I also know that worthwhile things take time." The directness of his gaze made Violet self-conscious again. She turned slightly, allowing her hair to fall forward, concealing the scarred side of her face. Isaac reached across the table, gently brushing her hair back. Violet froze at the unexpected touch. "Don't hide from me," he said softly. "Please." "It's difficult not to," Violet whispered. "I understand. But I'd like to see you, all of you, if you'll allow it." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Violet couldn't name, but felt in the quickening of her pulse. "Perhaps someday," she said finally. Isaac nodded, withdrawing his hand. "I can be patient." After dinner, they walked slowly back toward the boarding house, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the street. "Would you like to see my ranch someday?" Isaac asked. "We could make an outing of it, you, me, Martha, if you'd like a chaperone. Sarah would be glad for female company, I'm sure." I'd like that, Violet said, surprised to realize how much she meant it. Next Saturday, perhaps? I could bring the wagon into town? That sounds lovely. They reached the boarding house steps too soon. Violet turned to face him, conscious of Martha's likely watchful presence behind the curtains. Thank you for dinner, Mr. Keller. Isaac, please. At least when we're not in front of the entire town. Violet smiled. Isaac, then, and you may call me Violet. Violet, he repeated, as if savoring the sound. It suits you, delicate but resilient. He took her hand, raising it briefly to his lips in a gesture that seemed both old-fashioned and perfectly natural coming from him. Until Saturday, Violet. Violet watched him walk away, her hand still tingling from the brief contact. For the first time since the accident, she felt a spark of something that might be hope. The promised Saturday outing to Isaac's ranch arrived clear and bright. Violet dressed practically in a plain skirt and shirtwaist with sturdy boots for walking. Martha insisted on sending along a basket of freshly baked bread and preserves, as a thank you for the invitation. Isaac arrived with a well-maintained wagon pulled by two handsome bays. He jumped down to help Violet aboard, his hands strong and sure at her waist. Martha declined to join them, citing household duties, but giving Violet a knowing wink when Isaac wasn't looking. The journey to the ranch took about an hour, the wagon rolling through magnificent country. The San Juan Mountains rose majestically in the distance, while closer at hand, green meadows stretched out, dotted with wildflowers and grazing cattle. It's beautiful, Violet said, genuinely awed by the landscape. I thought the same the first time I saw it, Isaac replied, handling the reins with practiced ease. I was riding with a cavalry unit, scouting for the army after the war. The moment I saw this valley, I knew I'd come back someday. How did you acquire the land? Saved every penny from my army pay, then worked as a trail boss for 3 years after that. Bought the first 100 acres from a discouraged prospector who decided Colorado winters weren't to his liking. Added more over time. The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Violet could understand why to build something like this from nothing took determination and vision. They crested a small rise, and the ranch came into view below them. A substantial log house stood in a protected hollow, with several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn arranged nearby. A creek wound through the property, its banks lined with cottonwoods just coming into full leaf. Welcome to the Triple K, Isaac said. Keller's place. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the sun. Beside her was Caleb, who began running toward the wagon as soon as he recognized them. Miss Dawson, you came, he shouted, his face alight with excitement. Isaac reined in the horses as they reached the yard. Sarah, this is Miss Violet Dawson. Violet, my sister Sarah Keller Porter. Sarah was a slender woman with the same gray eyes as her brother, though strain had etched fine lines around them that made her appear older than she likely was. She smiled warmly at Violet. Welcome to our home, Miss Dawson. Caleb hasn't stopped talking about your visit since Isaac mentioned it. Please call me Violet, and thank you for having me. Martha sent some bread and preserves. She indicated the basket at her feet. How thoughtful, Sarah said. Come inside and refresh yourself after the journey. Then I'm sure Caleb will want to show you every inch of the ranch. The house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, with a spacious main room dominated by a stone fireplace. The furnishings were simple but solid, with a few feminine touches, embroidered cushions, curtains at the windows that must be Sarah's influence. Sarah served coffee and slices of apple pie at the large wooden table, while Caleb chattered eagerly about his pony, the new calves, and the eagle's nest on the cliffs behind the property. Slow down, son, Isaac said, though his tone was indulgent. Miss Dawson isn't going anywhere for a few hours. You'll have time to show her everything. Nearly everything, Sarah amended with a smile. Some parts of the ranch are a bit too rough for a proper outing. I'm tougher than I look, Violet said, surprising herself with her boldness. Isaac's eyes crinkled with amusement. I don't doubt that for a moment. After refreshments, Caleb could hardly contain his impatience to begin the tour. Isaac suggested they start with the barn and corrals, where new foals had been born just weeks earlier. The barn was immaculate, the stalls freshly mucked, with the sweet smell of hay filling the air. In one of the larger stalls, a chestnut mare stood protectively beside a wobbly-legged foal. "This is Copper," Caleb announced proudly, "and her baby doesn't have a name yet. Uncle Isaac says we have to wait to see what kind of personality he has." "That's wise," Violet said, admiring the beautiful animals. "Names are important." "Do you like horses, Miss Dawson?" Caleb asked. "I do, though I've never had much opportunity to ride," Violet admitted. "Uncle Isaac could teach you. He's the best rider in the county." Isaac chuckled. "That might be a slight exaggeration, but I'd be happy to teach you someday if you're interested." The thought of learning to ride, of having a reason to return to this beautiful place, was appealing. "I'd like that," Violet said. The tour continued with the chicken coop, the vegetable garden Sarah had started, and the small creek where Caleb proudly demonstrated his fishing skills, though no fish were caught during their brief visit. As the afternoon progressed, Violet found herself relaxing more than she had in months. There was something about the openness of the landscape, the straightforward warmth of Isaac's family, that eased the constant tension she carried. Even the habitual protective turn of her face to hide her scars seemed less necessary here. After a hearty dinner prepared by Sarah, Isaac suggested they walk up to a ridgeline that offered views of the entire valley. Caleb begged to come along, but Sarah insisted it was time for his evening chores. "We won't be gone long," Isaac promised the disappointed boy, "and Miss Dawson will visit again soon." The path to the ridge was steep in places, but well-worn. Isaac occasionally offered his hand to help Violet over rougher sections, his grip warm and secure. When they reached the top, the view took Violet's breath away. The valley spread out below them, the late afternoon sun gilding the meadows and catching the silver ribbon of the creek. In the distance, the mountains were turning purple against the sky. "It's magnificent," Violet said softly. "Worth the climb?" "Absolutely." They stood in companionable silence for a time, absorbing the view. Then Isaac turned to her, his expression serious. "I'm glad you came today, Violet." "So am I," she replied honestly. "Your home is wonderful. You've built something special here." "It's been my life's work," Isaac acknowledged, "but lately I've been thinking it's missing something important." Violet's heart quickened at his tone. "What's that?" Isaac took a step closer. "Someone to share it with, someone who appreciates beauty and goodness, someone who isn't afraid of hard work and challenges." "That sounds like a tall order," Violet said, trying to keep her voice light despite the intensity of his gaze. "I used to think so." His eyes searched her face, lingering on her scars without flinching. "Now I'm not so sure." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently traced the line of her jaw on the scarred side of her face. Violet trembled but didn't move. "You're beautiful, Violet," he said softly. "Inside and out." "You can't mean that," she whispered, even as her heart raced at his touch. "Look at me." "I am looking," Isaac said firmly. "I see strength and courage. I see kindness in how you treat Caleb and the other children. I see intelligence in your conversation. And yes, I see beauty in your eyes, your smile when you forget to hide it, the way you move." Tears pricked at Violet's eyes. "No one has, since the accident, no one has said." "Then they're blind fools," Isaac said simply. "May I kiss you, Violet?" For a heartbeat she hesitated, old fears rising up. Then she nodded, hardly believing her own courage. Isaac's kiss was gentle, his lips warm against hers, his hand cradling her face with exquisite care. It was brief, but it sent waves of sensation through Violet that she had thought were lost to her forever. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. "I'm falling in love with you, Violet Dawson. I don't expect you to feel the same yet, but I wanted you to know." Violet's mind spun with conflicting emotions, joy, disbelief, fear. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything now," Isaac assured her. Just promise me you'll keep visiting. Give us a chance to see where this might lead." "I promise," Violet said, her voice stronger than she expected. "I want that too." The sun was beginning to set as they made their way back down to the ranch house. Sarah gave Violet a warm hug before she left, and Caleb extracted a promise that she would come again soon. On the drive back to Telluride, Violet sat closer to Isaac than she had on the journey out. As the stars began to appear in the deepening blue of the sky, she felt a contentment that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. Over the following months, Violet's visits to the Triple K became regular events. Sometimes Martha would accompany her. Other times, Caleb would stay in town after school for a few hours so that Sarah could join them on the return journey, providing the necessary propriety. Isaac taught Violet to ride, starting with a gentle mare named Daisy. At first, she was terrified, but his patient instruction and unwavering confidence in her abilities gradually built her skills and courage. By midsummer, she could competently handle a horse along the ranch's easier trails, a fact that filled her with unexpected pride. In town, their courtship became a subject of inevitable gossip, but Violet found she cared less with each passing week. Isaac was respected in the community, and his obvious regard for her seemed to soften even the most judgmental attitudes. At church, he sat beside her openly. At community gatherings, he sought her company without hesitation. The school term ended in June, but Miss Winters asked Violet to continue helping with summer sessions for those children whose parents wanted them to keep up with their studies. Violet eagerly agreed, both because she loved teaching and because it gave her a purpose and income of her own. One warm July evening, Isaac invited Violet for a ride to a special spot on the ranch he wanted to show her. Martha, with twinkling eyes, pronounced it perfectly proper since they would be back before dark. The spot turned out to be a small meadow filled with wildflowers, beside a bend in the creek where the water formed a clear, deep pool. A massive cottonwood provided shade, its leaves rustling softly in the breeze. "This is my favorite place on the ranch," Isaac said as he helped Violet dismount. "I come here when I need to think or make important decisions." "It's lovely," Violet said, taking in the peaceful scene. Isaac spread a blanket beneath the tree and produced a small picnic from his saddlebags: bread, cheese, dried fruit, and a bottle of wine that he admitted Martha had provided. As they ate, they talked about everything and nothing: the progress of the ranch, Violet's students, books they had read, dreams they harbored. The ease between them had grown steadily since that first kiss on the ridge, blossoming into a comfortable companionship punctuated by moments of breathtaking intensity. After they finished eating, Isaac took Violet's hand, his expression growing serious. "I brought you here today for a reason, Violet." Her heart quickened. "Oh?" "I told you once that Kellers know what they want when they see it," he said, his eyes holding hers. "I've known since that first dance we didn't have at the social. You're what I want, Violet, your strength, your gentleness, your mind, your heart." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Opening it, he revealed a ring with a modest but brilliant diamond. "I'm asking you to be my wife, to share my life and my ranch, to help raise Caleb, to build a future together." His voice was steady, but Violet could see the vulnerability in his eyes. "Will you marry me, Violet?" For a moment, Violet couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotion. 6 months ago, she had arrived in Telluride believing her future was empty, her chances for love and family destroyed along with her face. Now this remarkable man was offering her everything she had thought forever lost. "Isaac," she began, her voice trembling, "I need to ask you something first." "Anything." She took a deep breath. "Are you certain?" "About me. About—" Her hand went to her scarred cheek, a gesture that had become less frequent but still emerged in moments of insecurity. Isaac reached up, gently covering her hand with his own. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Violet, all of you." "My face is scarred," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "It will always be scarred. It won't improve much more than this." "Your beauty shines from within," Isaac said simply. "The scars are part of you, part of your journey to me. I wouldn't change a single line of them if it meant changing who you are." Tears filled Violet's eyes at his words, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. "Yes," she said, her voice gaining strength. "Yes, I will marry you, Isaac Keller." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. The wedding took place in late September, when the aspen trees around Telluride had turned to gold. The ceremony was held in the church, with Martha giving Violet away in the absence of her own family. Sarah stood as her matron of honor, while Caleb proudly carried the rings. Violet wore a gown of ivory silk that Martha and Sarah had worked on secretly, surprising her with it a week before the wedding. It had a high collar and long sleeves, elegant without being ostentatious, perfect for a frontier bride. Her hair was arranged simply, with small white flowers woven through it, but she wore no veil. At Isaac's request, she left her face fully visible, her scars a testament to her survival and strength. The reception was held at the boarding house, with seemingly half the town in attendance. Violet, who had once feared the stares and whispers of these same people, found herself smiling and laughing, accepting congratulations with genuine joy. If some eyes still lingered on her scars, she no longer noticed or cared. As the celebration continued, Isaac drew her away to the relative privacy of the porch. The afternoon light caught the new gold band on her finger as he took her hands in his. "Happy, Mrs. Keller?" he asked, his eyes crinkling with his smile. "More than I ever thought possible," Violet replied honestly. "I have a wedding gift for you," Isaac said. "I wasn't sure whether to wait until we got home, but I don't think I can." From his pocket, he withdrew an envelope and handed it to her. Curious, Violet opened it to find a deed inside. Her eyes widened as she read it. "You're giving me part of the ranch?" "Half, to be exact," Isaac said. "It's yours now, legally as well as in every other way." "But why? Everything you have would be mine by marriage anyway." Isaac's expression grew earnest. "Because I want you to know that you're my partner in this, in everything, equal, always. What we build together." Violet was speechless, touched beyond words by the gesture and what it represented. "There's more," Isaac continued. "I've set aside funds to expand the house. Sarah's been drawing up plans, more rooms, a proper library for your books, a bigger kitchen." "It sounds wonderful," Violet said, her voice thick with emotion. "And one more thing." Isaac took a deep breath. "I want children, Violet, our children, as many as you're willing to have, but only when you're ready." The thought of children, a family of her own, brought fresh tears to Violet's eyes. "I want that too," she whispered. "So much." Isaac pulled her into his arms, heedless of who might see through the windows. "Then we'll build it all, together. Our ranch, our home, our family." As the sun began to set over Telluride, painting the mountains in shades of pink and gold, Violet Keller stood in her husband's embrace and marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From despair to hope, from isolation to belonging, from hiding to being truly seen, it was a transformation more profound than she could have imagined on that blood-soaked day when she'd first arrived. The scars remained, would always remain, but they no longer defined her. They were simply part of her story, a story that was still being written, page by beautiful page. Life at the Triple K quickly settled into a rhythm that suited Violet perfectly. The expansion of the house began almost immediately, with Isaac hiring skilled carpenters from Telluride to work through the mild autumn weather before winter set in. Violet and Sarah collaborated on the plans, creating spaces that would serve the family now and in the future. When the school term began again, Violet continued teaching, riding Daisy into town 3 days a week while Caleb attended classes. The boy was thriving under the combined attention of his mother, uncle, and new aunt, his natural intelligence flourishing with Violet's guidance. Sarah, too, seemed to blossom with Violet's presence in the household. The two women formed a deep friendship, sharing the domestic responsibilities and finding in each other the sisterly companionship both had previously lacked. When a handsome widower with 2 young daughters began calling on Sarah that winter, Violet quietly encouraged the relationship, recognizing the light it brought to her sister-in-law's eyes. The winter of 1876-77 was harsh, with heavy snowfalls isolating the ranch for weeks at a time. But within their snug home, enlarged and improved by the recent construction, the Keller family created a haven of warmth and contentment. In the evenings, they gathered around the fireplace, Isaac whittling or repairing tack, Sarah knitting, Violet reading aloud to them all, while Caleb built elaborate structures with wooden blocks Isaac had crafted for him. During these intimate evenings, Violet sometimes caught Isaac watching her with a look of such profound love that it took her breath away. Their marriage had deepened quickly. The physical expression of their love as natural and beautiful as everything else between them. Isaac's tenderness never faltered, especially when touching her scarred skin, which he treated with the same reverence as the rest of her body. Spring arrived late but glorious, the ranch bursting into green life almost overnight. With the better weather came more frequent visits to town, social gatherings with neighbors, and a return to the full schedule of ranch work. Violet threw herself into all of it, learning the business side of ranching from Isaac while continuing her teaching duties. It was early May when Violet first suspected she might be expecting a child. By June, she was certain. She chose a moment when she and Isaac were alone, riding together on a quiet Sunday afternoon, to share the news. "I have something to tell you," she said as they paused to rest their horses on a scenic overlook. Isaac turned to her, his expression curious. "What is it?" "I believe we'll need one of those new rooms sooner than expected." She placed a hand on her still flat stomach, watching his face as understanding dawned. "Violet," he breathed, swinging down from his horse and lifting her from her saddle in one smooth motion. "A baby?" "You're sure?" She nodded, laughing at his exuberance. "As sure as I can be. Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday when I was in town." Isaac whooped with joy, lifting her up and spinning her around before setting her gently on her feet, suddenly concerned. "I didn't hurt you, did I? Or the baby?" "We're fine," Violet assured him, touched by his immediate protectiveness. "It's early yet, the baby won't come until winter." Isaac placed his hand reverently over hers. "Our child," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The first of many?" "Let's start with this one," Violet replied with a smile. "But yes, I hope for several more." The news was shared with the family that evening, to universal delight. Sarah immediately began planning baby clothes and furniture, while Caleb peppered them with questions about his future cousin. By the next day, it seemed all of Telluride knew that the Kellers were expecting. Such was the speed of news in a small community. The pregnancy progressed normally, though Violet found herself tiring more easily as summer's heat intensified. She reluctantly cut back her teaching hours, and Isaac insisted on hiring additional help for the household to ease her burden. By autumn, her condition was unmistakable, her slender frame transformed by the growing life within. Winter came early that year, the first snow falling in late October. By December, Violet's time was near. Dr. Miller made the journey to the ranch several times to check on her, pronouncing her healthy but advising her to conserve her strength. The baby, a son they named James Isaac Keller after both their fathers, arrived during a snowstorm in the first week of January 1878. The birth was difficult but without serious complications. When Isaac was finally allowed into the bedroom, he found Violet pale but radiant, cradling their newborn son. "He's perfect," Isaac whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he gently touched his son's tiny hand. "He has your chin," Violet said, her exhaustion evident, but her joy undimmed. "And your eyes, I think," Isaac replied, though the baby's eyes were still the unfocused blue of all newborns. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, putting his arm around Violet and drawing her against his side. "Thank you," he said softly, "for our son, for your strength, for everything you are." Violet leaned into his embrace, feeling the profound rightness of this moment, this life they had built together. "I should be thanking you," she said, "for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for giving me this family, this home." "We gave it to each other," Isaac corrected gently, "and we'll keep building it, day by day." Little James thrived, growing quickly into a sturdy, curious infant who delighted the entire household. Caleb, now 10, appointed himself special protector of his cousin, spending hours entertaining the baby and helping with his care. Sarah, whose courtship with the widower had progressed to an engagement, doted on her nephew with almost grandmotherly affection. By the summer of 1878, the Triple K was prospering beyond even Isaac's ambitious plans. The cattle herd had increased substantially, and his experiments with horse breeding were beginning to show promising results. With Violet's careful bookkeeping and business sense, the ranch's finances were stronger than ever. It was during this time that Violet received a letter that would reconnect her with her past in unexpected ways. It came from Pennsylvania, from a cousin she hadn't heard from since before the accident. The cousin explained that she had been trying to locate Violet for nearly 2 years, ever since learning of the tragic fire that had claimed her parents and their home. "There's something you should know," the letter continued. "Your father's investments were not lost, as you may have assumed. The papers were secured in a bank vault and have continued to generate income. As his only heir, a substantial sum awaits you." Violet read the letter to Isaac that evening after James was asleep. "I had no idea," she said, still stunned by the revelation. "I thought everything was gone." "What do you want to do?" Isaac asked, practical as always. Violet considered the question seriously. "I should go to Pennsylvania, I suppose. There will be legal matters to settle, papers to sign." "We'll go together," Isaac decided. "In the fall, after the cattle drive. Sarah and Caleb can manage here for a few weeks with the help we've hired." The journey east in October 1878 was Violet's first time leaving Colorado since her arrival over 2 years earlier. It was also baby James's first major journey, though at 9 months old, he proved to be a surprisingly good traveler. The trip stirred complicated emotions for Violet. Pennsylvania held painful memories, yet it had been her home for most of her life. As the train carried them eastward, she found herself both dreading and anticipating what awaited them. Her cousin Edward met them at the station, his initial shock at her scarred face quickly masked by genuine warmth. He had arranged accommodations for them at a respectable hotel and had already scheduled meetings with the necessary legal representatives. Over the next 2 weeks, Violet worked through the process of claiming her inheritance, a sum that proved to be far more substantial than she had imagined. There were stocks, bonds, and even property that had been part of her father's carefully built portfolio. "What will you do with it all?" Edward asked as they finalized the last of the paperwork. "You could live quite comfortably here, or in any major city." Violet exchanged a glance with Isaac, who had been a steady, supportive presence throughout the proceedings. "My home is in Colorado now," she said firmly, "but this inheritance opens possibilities I hadn't considered." Before leaving Pennsylvania, Violet made 2 significant decisions. First, she established a scholarship fund at the small college where her father had taught, specifically for young women pursuing education. Second, she arranged for a portion of the funds to be transferred to Telluride for a purpose she had been contemplating for some time. Upon their return to Colorado in November, Violet called a family meeting to share her plans. Sarah, now married to her widower and living in a newly built house nearby, joined them with her husband and stepdaughters. "I want to establish a proper school in Telluride," Violet announced. "Not just the one-room schoolhouse we have now, but a real educational institution that can grow with the town." "That's a wonderful idea," Sarah exclaimed. "The town certainly needs it, with new families arriving all the time." "I'll donate the land on the north edge of our property," Isaac added, immediately supportive. "It's close enough to town to be accessible but has room for expansion." Caleb, now entering his teen years, had a practical question. "Will you be the teacher, Aunt Violet?" "I'll be the head mistress," Violet clarified. "We'll hire qualified teachers as the school grows. But yes, I'll continue teaching, at least until our family grows further." She exchanged a meaningful glance with Isaac, who grinned broadly at the hint. Construction on the new Telluride Academy began in the spring of 1879. Violet threw herself into every aspect of the project, from architectural plans to curriculum development, while still managing her responsibilities at the ranch and caring for young James, who was developing into an active toddler. The school opened its doors in September 1879, with 3 qualified teachers and 50 students ranging from 6 to 16 years old. At the dedication ceremony, Violet stood before the assembled townspeople, her scarred face fully visible, her voice strong and clear as she spoke of the power of education to transform lives and communities. Isaac stood at her side, their son balanced on his hip, his expression a mixture of pride and adoration. As Violet concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause, he leaned close to whisper in her ear, "Have I told you today how much I love you?" Violet smiled, the expression transforming her face in a way that made even her scars seem beautiful. "Not in the last hour or so." "A serious oversight," Isaac replied, his eyes twinkling. "I love you, Violet Keller, more with each passing day." The academy flourished, quickly becoming a cornerstone of the community. Violet balanced her roles as headmistress, rancher's wife, and mother with remarkable grace, though not without occasional moments of exhaustion and frustration. Through it all, Isaac remained her steadfast partner, stepping in whenever she needed support, celebrating each of her accomplishments as proudly as his own. In the spring of 1880, Violet discovered she was expecting their second child. The pregnancy was easier than her first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because the careful rhythms of their life accommodated the changes in her energy and capabilities. Their daughter, Catherine Sarah Keller, was born on a crisp November morning, a perfect counterpoint to her brother's winter arrival. Kate, as they called her from the beginning, had Isaac's gray eyes and what promised to become Violet's auburn hair. "She's going to be a beauty," Isaac said, cradling his infant daughter with practiced ease. "Beautiful like her mother," 2-year-old James echoed solemnly, repeating a phrase he had often heard his father say. Violet's heart swelled with emotion as she watched her family. The scars that had once seemed to define her future had become merely one aspect of a rich, full life built on love and mutual respect. The girl who had arrived in Telluride believing her life effectively over had become a woman surrounded by purpose, achievement, and deep, abiding love. Life continued to unfold in ways Violet could never have predicted on that first day in Telluride. The ranch prospered, the academy grew, their family expanded with the arrival of a third child, another son they named Thomas in 1882. Caleb, now 15, was developing into a fine young man with an unexpected talent for architecture, inspired by his involvement in the academy's construction. In the summer of 1883, 7 years after her arrival in Colorado, Violet found herself once again standing on the ridge overlooking the ranch, the spot where Isaac had proposed to her all those years ago. The view was largely unchanged, the beauty of the valley still breathtaking, though the ranch itself had expanded, with new barns, expanded corrals, and acres of additional grazing land. She heard Isaac's footsteps before she felt his arms slide around her waist from behind. She leaned back against him, comfortable in the familiar embrace. "The children asleep?" she asked. "Finally," Isaac confirmed, resting his chin lightly on her shoulder. "Kate insisted on 3 stories tonight." Violet smiled. Their 3-year-old daughter was determined and persuasive, traits Isaac claimed she'd inherited from her mother. "I was thinking about the first time you brought me here," Violet said, covering his hands with her own. "How impossible it seemed then that I could ever be this happy." "I knew," Isaac said simply. "From the moment I saw you at that social, trying so hard to be invisible, I knew you were the one I'd been waiting for." Violet turned in his arms to face him. At 32, Isaac was in his prime, his face weathered from years in the Colorado sun and wind, lines of experience etched around his eyes and mouth. To Violet, he was more handsome than ever. "Even with this?" she asked, touching her scarred cheek. It was a question she rarely asked anymore, but on certain reflective days the old insecurity surfaced briefly. Isaac's answer was the same as it had always been. He kissed her scarred cheek first, then her lips. "Especially with that," he said. "Your beauty shines from within, Violet. It always has. The scars just show the world how strong you are, what you've overcome." He took her hand, leading her to a blanket he'd spread beneath the cottonwood tree. They sat together, watching as the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Thomas had lived?" Isaac asked after a comfortable silence. "If you'd arrived in Telluride to marry him as planned?" Violet considered the question thoughtfully. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not with regret. Thomas was a good man, but we didn't know each other, not really. What we had was a courtship conducted through letters, based on idealized versions of ourselves." She squeezed Isaac's hand. "What we have is real, built day by day through joy and hardship, seeing each other clearly and loving what we see." Isaac raised their joined hands, kissing her knuckles. "I wouldn't change a single moment of our journey." "Neither would I," Violet replied, meaning it completely. As darkness fell over the valley, they remained on the ridge, talking softly of the past they had shared and the future still unfolding before them. Their children, their ranch, their school, their community, all flourishing because two people had seen beyond the surface to the true beauty within. And as stars appeared one by one in the vast Colorado sky, Violet Keller understood with perfect clarity that the scars that had once seemed a life sentence of loneliness had instead become the beginning of her greatest blessing. A love story written not in flawless features, but in the enduring strength of the human heart.